What's going on, guys? High time, and it is finally here, the long-awaited, long-overdue American Mary review. This one is a patron request for Horrorhead Heather, and it took quite a long time to get around to doing this one. The request for it came in right as the Friday the 13th review series last year was starting to take off, so as overwhelming as that was, this was set on the back burner, and then a plethora of other issues that we're not going to really get into right now sort of got in the way. But that aside, American Mary review is finally here. Let's get into American Mary. So American Mary stars Catherine Isabel, Antonio Cupo, Tristan Risk, David Lovgren, and John Emmett Tracy, and was written and directed by the Soska sisters, Jen and Sylvia. So American Mary follows a financially struggling medical student who, following a worst-case scenario encounter with her college professor, becomes involved in the body modification community, which is a really interesting sort of premise for the film, and it's one that I think sort of separates itself from usually like the types of horror films that I prefer watching, which are usually the slashers. But there is like a little bit of that in here, but it blends that with body horror, and you got this great character study, and there's almost this weird sort of Frankenstein meets Shakespeare element to the film. I find that the body modification, it sort of seems like a sort of an analogy with Mary's life and the directional shift that it takes once she starts to get involved with it. She's getting paid to, make these changes to people's bodies, and the further she gets into that, and that's sort of a lucrative, if not almost, I don't know, the film makes it feel like it's an illegal practice, which I'm not 100% sure if that is true, but you sort of see there is this weird change in her character as the film goes on. Of course, what happens with her college professor really lends some sort of credence to why she's sort of devolving on a psychological level. It's understandable and wholly tragic at the same time, really. And Mary overall is a character that you really sympathize for, because you see at the beginning of the film, her professor really does treat her like crap in class, and he gets even worse at this party that he invites her to later on in the film, or runs into her at a party where another one of the doctors invited her to. And it's just some really bad situation she gets involved in there. But she bounces back from that in a really awesome way, and that's, again, where you sort of see this directional shift with her personal psychology there going on. With her sort of psychological breakdown, you really get a lot of interesting things going on. Because, again, you've got her trying to sort of balance her newfound profession with these like personal connections that she starts to develop through the film. One, of course, is with her boss, this dude who operates the strip club, Billy, played by Antonio Cupo. He hires her to do this emergency surgery at one point in the film, and throughout you sort of see that they maintain this professional boss-worker relationship, but at the same time there's sort of this sexual tension that sort of undercoats their relationship in a really interesting way. And you see that come to an interesting head, so to speak, when, she comes in and sees one of the dancers at this club, giving him some of the slop top. And she attempts to just murder this girl in the bathroom a couple minutes after that. So you kind of see that she's really at a crazy space in her mind at that point. And I think it's safe to say crazy by then. Although she does have a lot of really bad shit kind of going on. Because you also have this detective who is investigating the disappearance of her professor. And it doesn't help that another professor sort of went missing, thanks to Billy on that one. This Detective Doler, he's sort of an interesting character because he wants to help Mary. He's pretty damn sure that she's involved to some degree with Dr. Grant's disappearance, And I don't know, I almost get this Sydney and Kincaid sort of a vibe from Scream 3 with these two. He feels like he wants her not just to help her, but feels like he wants something more, but it's kind of hard to tell because you don't really get a whole lot of this character in the film, but the little bits and pieces we do get of him as this investigator to sort of play against everything that's going on in the film, it just creates an interesting dynamic that I feel could have been explored a little bit more. You feel that she doesn't want to, she doesn't want to get caught because she's going to go to fucking prison for a long ass time if he were to find out what she'd been doing there, especially with the whole Dr. Grant thing. But I feel like there was a good amount of sort of unexplored potential with this sort of the detective aspect of the film. I don't know, it almost feels like we could cut it out and it doesn't feel like the film's missing a whole lot. It really is sort of an interesting dynamic between the two characters there, because there's a point where she's getting ready to drug him because he's starting to really pick up on where things are going in the film, and she decides not to. Makes you wonder, like, is she starting to feel like she should turn herself in, or what's going on with that? I feel like the film didn't really explain that too much, but it's interesting nonetheless. You've got this other character, Beatrice, who's, I don't know, I guess you'd say she's like a secondary character. Her relationship with Mary starts, of course, professional, as sort of most of them do in this film, but it sort of becomes a little more personalized, where Beatrice kind of becomes that friend that you didn't want to be friends with, but they just sort of became your friend through just being there. Like, you didn't ask for it, but it just sort of happens. But Beatrice is a really fucking offbeat character, really sort of eccentric and cartoony. Of course, you got her looking like Betty Boop through a shit ton of surgical procedures, and she's got this best friend, Ruby, who's also undergone a lot of body mod surgeries to make her look like a Barbie doll. And that's sort of, those two are sort of where Mary really gets into the body modification community almost full tilt. Because they post online sort of, hey, there's this surgeon, American Mary or Bloody Mary. This is her work. Check it out. And that's how Mary starts making her money. And it really is just sort of interesting how the film explores this sort of underground community in a way where it's like, as someone who's obviously not a part of the body mod community, I feel like I'm getting sort of a glimpse into that. Sort of like how 8mm goes into the smutty side of things in a different way. It almost has that kind of feel to it, where it's exploring this very niche market. Dr. Grant also is another character I want to talk about too real fast, because again, this guy is a total piece of shit, guys. He's of course her professor at the beginning. He drugs and rapes her at a party that she was invited to with just a bunch of other surgeons. And it's like, okay, yeah, this guy's a real piece of shit. Initially, he was just an asshole that you thought, hey, maybe he's not going to be that bad of a guy. No, this movie shows you he is worse than you thought he could be. And, after Mary uses her connections at the club to subdue and sort of begin working on Dr. Grant in a really cool way, because he's telling her early on in the film that you are a surgeon, you can't afford to make mistakes. So she tells him, well, you're going to be my practice. So she does 4 different types of procedures on him: amputation, tongue splitting, 3D implants, all that fun stuff. And it's really crazy once you see the fully modified Dr. Grant. You get this scene where he's she comes to check on him, and this security guard just kind of stumbles in there, and that's a really interesting scene, because it's almost where the film takes an interesting directional turn where it feels like it becomes a whole different movie, because she attacks the guard and pretty much, for all intents and purposes, kills him. And I don't think we really see much of Dr. Grant after that one. It displays that walking of the fine line. Like, as in, Mary knows what she's doing is ultimately not the most virtuous sort of thing. Like, her intentions are kind of good, but in sort of a selfish kind of way. And that's something that you kind of get throughout this whole film, too. It's like, there's two sides of the coin where, hey, we could handle it this way, sort of the lawful way, hence the Detective Doller character. And then you have the characters at the club, which kind of display this sort of seedy underground element to the film. I think it's really sort of interesting how those two kind of things meet up in Mary's life there, and it really conflicts her more as a character. And really fast, I do want to jump into Katharine Isabelle's performance as Mary. She really is the star of this film. I mean, of course, she's the titular character, but she really is the only character aside from Billy who feels like they were actually developed a little bit. You want to see the best for her. And, of course, by the end of the film, we realize that there is no perfect ending for her. Katharine Isabelle, I think, plays this character pretty great. I mean, she does really good with what she was given. I don't think that she was the best developed character that I've ever seen in a movie, but given all the moving parts involved in this film, I think she was sort of developed well enough. It's, and I know I praise this film for being sort of a character study, but it feels like the characters were less developed than they could have been. A little bit more of the character development would have been nice, but I don't know, Katharine Isabelle really does knock it out of the park with what she is given. The acting overall in this film is pretty good. Again, despite the characters being a little underwritten, it feels like. I think that really all of the cast did pretty good with what they're given here. I mean, you got a couple performances in the film that were a little shaky at best, but I feel like just about everyone who has these larger roles, they really did good at bringing to the table what they had to. That's really, I think, one of the best praises you can give a film. I know that I said, hey, this is a good character study. A lot of the characters do feel severely underwritten here, and even Mary to some extent feels a little underwritten, but I think the characters in this film all serve the purpose pretty well. The film itself overall, I think, is really well directed and really well shot. It's a really beautiful film to look at, but I feel like it really does struggle in the writing department just a little bit, and that's not to take anything away from the Soska sisters, but it just feels like there's some things that could have been a little more, they could have been given a little more meat, and I don't know if maybe that was part of the sort of artistic direction that they had for this film, because it really does feel like an artsy picture. I don't know, the writing just feels like it could have been handled a little bit better, a little more thorough. That really is my main nitpick, is some of the writing. I love the whole idea of show don't tell, but there really are some small things that really could have been sort of elaborated on, specifically when we find out that Mary's grandmother dies. I honestly had to go to this film's Wikipedia page to get that confirmed, because Mary gets the call from her grandmother's phone, and she's like, hello? Oh no. And then deletes the number. And sure, you get the visual cues of her sadness and becoming a little more of a sort of a mental train wreck. Maybe I didn't get the sort of nuance to it all, but it felt like that could have been a little more set in stone there. That's just a little nitpick, really, just with the writing. Some of it does feel a little clunky, like maybe they had like a first or second draft and they're like, alright, that's gonna be our shooting script. But that's not to take anything away from the film overall. By the ending of this film, we do really have a sad ending here. I mean, because again, as I said before, Mary is a character you wanted to see sort of emerge victorious by the end, but we don't get that here. She's killed by Ruby's husband, and Ruby again is the Barbie doll lady. When her husband sees the aftermath of the procedure, where she's been pretty much completely turned into a Barbie doll through surgical procedures, he's like, oh hell no. The film takes a pretty pretty dark and sad turn there. I mean, he goes to Mary's apartment, sticks her real good, but she doesn't let him get away. He fucking gets his, which is really nice. And she dies on the floor in her, I don't know, I guess we can call it a studio, but in her little studio / operating room, we get her trying to stitch herself together. I think that really does help the film in some ways, though, to give it that really dark ending. And that I think kind of brings it up for me just a little bit. It almost justifies some of the nitpicks that I have, because you guys know I like that sort of dark, nihilistic ending. And this film really delivers with that. So I thought that was pretty impressive there. I don't know if impressive is even the right word, but the way it sort of takes on that dark and depressing ending, it really does help the film. I know that I nitpicked just a little bit in this one, but I did find this film really to be mostly enjoyable. There's a lot of really cool effects going on, especially when you get this montage of a lot of the different clients that Mary had dealt with. You just see their different body modifications that they've got. Like, you see one guy who's gotten the amputation. You got this one who did the little devil horn implants. You even get a infected dick piercing. I never thought I would see that in a film, or that I would be saying infected dick piercing in one of my videos. Filthy is as filthy does, I guess. There's a lot of visually appealing stuff going on here too, because again, the way the film is shot, it's got a really sort of artsy feel to it. And again, that's not typically the type of films that I'm accustomed to, but I think that it really works in this one. Again, with the art of body modification being sort of a central element to the film, I think that sort of helps it translate in a really cool way. In closing, guys, American Mary is a Shakespearean Frankenstein of a love story that is both tense as well as tragic. It is low-key in the violence that I tend to prefer in horror films, but what it lacks in violence, I think it does make up for in the story and characters. Again, I know that I sort of nitpicked those a little bit, but it really does sort of pick up in that department. And again, the visual presentation, I think, also makes up for that a little bit. But American Mary really is a wholly interesting film that should be seen and talked about more by people. American Mary earns itself 3.5 split tongues out of 5. One you should definitely check out. It's not necessarily my favorite horror film, but it's one that I'm glad I checked out. I mean, I've got it in my collection. It's good enough to merit being purchased. So you really ought to check it out. Go watch American Mary, guys. Anyway, guys, thank you all for watching. Please be sure to like and share this video. It really helps out the channel. And if you have not already, please subscribe. Thank you for embracing my return. It feels good to be back once again. And yeah, be sure to check out the awesome upcoming content coming on the channel. We've got the John Carpenter review series is still going, with The Fog being the next one that we're going to be taking a look at. There's the giveaway coming up on the 1st of December, so you're not going to want to miss out on that. As always, you guys have a good one. See you next time.